Well, to talk more about why America seems to be so gung-ho about going to war, I'm joined now by Gavin Marshall, project manager for the People's Book Project.com. Welcome to the show, Andrew. Is America addicted to war?
Well, it's just a part of the culture. I mean, if you look at upon America's founding in 1776, George Washington referred to the United States as a nascent empire. In fact, expanding to the West was one of the reasons why the founding fathers rebelled against the British, because they set up a line saying that you cannot expand past this point. And so immediately after the Revolution, of course, they began expanding. It's a part of America's embedded history as an institution in terms of part of the nation state itself. And yeah, of course, you could call it an addiction, but it's just a fact of the state structure and ideology itself, which is the excuses are always changing, whether it's to keep out the Europeans, like as dictated in the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, whether it's to fight great wars, whether it's World War I or World War II, or the evil empire of the Soviet Union. And it's even acknowledged that these are simply excuses. If you look at the National Security Doctrine, an official document put out by the National Security Council in 1991 at the end of the Cold War, they stated quite explicitly that the excuse of communism was never really a threat in the Middle East, but our interest there still remains. So it's basically saying, sorry, we've been lying for the past 50 years, but we're still going to be going to war.
Now, Andrew, who benefits from going to war?
Well, elites of all types. You have, of course, the political elite. You get expanded power, domestic power as well as international power, the financial and economic elite. So you have the corporations and the banks and their interests, and they're all embedded together in various institutions such as think tanks, which bring together elites from the academia, the media, banking, corporate world, and foreign policy circles to essentially work together to decide policy. So it benefits a whole coterie of different social groups, and the military-industrial complex is very prominent in that structure, creating military equipment, these types of things. But it expands beyond that. Every major industry and source of power benefits from war. And you look at right after 9/11 and the declaration of the war on terror, I mean, the United States alone didn't benefit. You had states all over the world began using terror as an excuse to serve their own benefits. So war is essentially the health of the state.
Now, do you think that oftentimes war can serve as a diversion from problems in our own country, whether they be social or economic problems, and we have plenty of both today?
Yeah, that's a important facet as well, and that certainly plays a part. I think the part that plays is more so in terms of not dictating the decision to go to war, so much as propagating it for the public so that the public is distracted. War is always on the agenda, no matter the circumstances, whether it's an economic crisis or economic growth. I mean, you look at the Clinton years where there was, in theory, great economic growth and development in the country. There was wars all over the place. You know, you had the Yugoslav destruction, you had all the sanctions in Iraq, the Congo Civil War, all these other interventions that the United States were involved in. So war is a constant, but when the excuse is propagated to distract, that's also very relevant, and that's why, of course, the Europeans are increasingly militaristic of late, because it's a great distraction for their major problems at home. And it's a great way to sort of rally the nation, the population, around a cause that doesn't threaten the power interests themselves.
Now, war should always be a last resort. I mean, when is it okay to go to war?
Personally, I don't think it is okay to go to war. I think that it's...
Ever?
I can't say never, but I would say that it's... I can't imagine a circumstance in which I would be an advocate for war, personally.
What if there's heinous atrocities that are being committed against a certain group of people, ethnic cleansing, or if there's a legitimate threat to our country?
War is a heinous atrocity. War is a threat to not only countries here in the West, but countries everywhere. War is, Howard Zinn once said, you can't declare a war on terror because war is terrorism. So in that sense, it's impossible to make legitimate.
What if there is a legitimate threat against our country?
Well, we are against our country, I guess you mean the United States, but the United States is the legitimate threat for the world. So there is no legitimate threat to the United States. It's the largest military power in the world. Nobody even comes close to being a threat to the United States. And if you look at the conceptions of what a threat is, I mean, take Iran, for example. It's a very good example. What is the threat of Iran today? We hear that they're developing nuclear weapons and they're going to wipe out Israel or be a huge threat to the region. Even though top officials, defense secretary, intelligence officials, the National Intelligence Council announced that Iran has no nuclear weapons, they have no nuclear weapons program, there's no evidence. So what is the actual threat? Well, if you look at the Pentagon and intelligence reports to Congress, they're a little more blunt. They state that Iran's military structure is not geared towards aggression and expansion, it's geared towards deterrence. So why is that a threat? Because if you're a world empire and you think that you have the right to own and control the world, any country, no matter how small or how big, having a deterrent capability is a threat to your interests in the sense that you can't go in and dictate to them to do whatever you want them to do. So in a sense, when deterrence is portrayed as a threat, you have to really look in the mirror and say, who's the real threat? We're the ones threatening Iran, which is itself an international war crime, as stipulated in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968.
Do you think it would be dangerous for Iran to get a hold of a nuclear weapon?
Well, nuclear weapons are dangerous in any sense, but if you look at public opinion in the Middle East, there was a major poll taken in 2010 of Arab public opinion, and the Arab world generally felt that the Middle East would be more stable and secure if Iran did acquire a nuclear weapon, because it would be a deterrent for Israel and the United States in terms of aggression in the region. I'm not personally in favor of any nuclear weapons. I think that that should be declared a nuclear-free zone, which was actually a stipulation that the U.S. signed on to in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
All right, Andrew, I'm sorry to cut you off there. We're out of time, but thank you very much for coming on the show. That was Andrew Gavin Marshall, project manager for the People's Book Project.com.